O nosso próximo palestrante é o professor Kyung-Han Hong. Ele é um pesquisador lá no MIT, no grupo do professor Franz Kärtner. Ele teve sua formação básica toda na Coreia e onde ele obteve graduação, mestrado e doutorado. Fez um pós-doc na Universidade de Michigan com o professor Gerhard Morrow, onde ele sempre vem trabalhando com pulsos bastante curtos. Atualmente trabalhando com pulsos da ordem de atossegundos, né, que é uma das fronteiras de pulsos extremamente curtos. Então ele está lá no MIT desde 2007 como pesquisador, cientista pesquisador, e agora é um pesquisador principal lá desse grupo do Laboratório de Pesquisa em Eletrônica do MIT.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Actually, this is my first time in Brazil, and I'm very glad to be here. And yeah, especially, I thank Edison Falco for his because he invited me into this symposium. Yeah, he was a former postdoc in our group, and he was my collaborator. And then recently we established a small collaboration program between MIT and Brazil under the MIT Brazil Seed Fund. So that's why I was able to come here and meet all of you here. Okay, today I'll talk about mid-IL, ultra-fast nonlinear optics in the extreme. Then before starting my talk, I'll briefly introduce our group. Actually, our group used to be very large. When Edison was in our group, we used to have 30 to 40 people in our group, but now we are down to only maybe 10 to 15, because Franz Kaltner, our group head, started another group in Germany. So, but still we are okay. So the main research theme of our group is ultra-fast terahertz to the X-ray pulses, and so we used to have this optics and quantum electronics group with the supervision with Eric Gippen and James Fujimoto, but Eric retired, and then Jim is moving to the biomedical optics. So only our group is working on the ultra-fast science now. Okay, this work has been done with many group members, as well as our group head, Franz Kaltner, and then our former members, including Jonathan Sequeira, who is now in USP in São Paulo and San Carlos, and then also, of course, Edison contributed to this work in the initial stage. So we had the collaboration with Lincoln Lab and also other universities. This work has been funded by DARPA in the US and Air Force Office of Scientific Research in the US, also Center for Free Electron Lasers in Hamburg. The contents of this talk is, after I introduce about the ultra-fast nonlinear optics in the extreme, and then I'm going to talk about two main topics. First one is the next generation strong field laser technology above the Taisafa amplifiers, and also the second one is the extreme nonlinear optics. One of them is the mid-IR laser filamentation, and the second one is the soft X-ray high harmonic generation, and then summarize my talk. Okay. So we all know that this year is the International Year of Light, and then the light is really, when we call the light, it really spans the entire wavelength from all the way to microwave to gamma rays. But when we talk about the light, we are mostly focusing this part from infrared or terahertz or down to X-rays. That's what we are usually talking about. In terms of the electron energy, we are talking about some eV to almost up to keV range. So in our lab, we are using the nonlinear frequency conversion technology to generate really ultra-fast light from terahertz to all the way down to hard X-rays. The main idea is that to use some strong near-IR picosecond laser pulse here, and then mixing with ultra-broadband near-IR pulse, we can cover the entire bandwidth. Not simultaneously, but we can cover from using different techniques, we can cover the various wavelength region. So typically we used many nonlinear optics techniques, but in this talk I'm going to cover optical parametric Chopper pulse amplification and supercontinuum generation and high harmonic generation. And also by accessing these ultra broadband mid-IR to terahertz pulses, we can really we have a lot of numerous applications in time-resolved studies and biological imaging, and attosecond science and electron acceleration, and some light application and so on. So today, yeah, I will focus on the mid-IR application and also soft X-ray generations. So I just briefly go through the basics of nonlinear optics. So when you go reach the intensity, laser intensity of typically 10 to 9 to 10 to 12 watt per square centimeter, you can easily see the nonlinear optical phenomena. So that means you are generating some new frequencies from the input frequency. So in this region, we call this as perturbative nonlinear optics or conventional nonlinear optics, in contrast to the extreme nonlinear optics I'm going to talk about. So the response of the boundary electrons to external electric field is called polarization, so which is represented by this chi value susceptibility. And then when we don't have any nonlinear polarization term, this is quite linear, and then this is basically the harmonic oscillator. So the omega, if you have the omega 1 coming in, and then you have omega 1 coming out. So there is no frequency conversion. But once you have a little bit higher intensity, like in this region, for example, and then this nonlinear polarization term is usually described with the Taylor expansion like this, and then those coefficients are quite small. But when you have a strong electric field, and then those coefficients becomes important and then play some role and generating some new frequency component. Basically, we are deviating the atomic potential from harmonic oscillator. So that's the main idea. And then maybe many of you already know about the second harmonic generation, third harmonic generation, self-edge modulation, and fourth harmonic generation, and so on. So especially this N2 value is very important. This is related to chi3 here. And these are still order of frequency, fourth order or something like that, but I'm going to talk about much higher order frequency conversion. So one of the examples is the supercontinuum generation and laser filamentation, which I'll discuss in this talk. So laser filamentation, for example, in the air, it can occur in solid in the low intensity, like the same intensity like this. But for example, if you want to see the laser filamentation in the air or gas, you need much higher intensity, like 10 to 13 watts per square centimeter, and then you start observing more extreme nonlinear optics. So the main mechanism of laser filamentation is the self-focusing, basically triggered by this N2 value, can be balanced by the natural diffraction of the light, or when you generate some plasma. So plasma defocusing plays the role for balancing this self-focusing, and then you can get some plasma channel like this, so which can span up to some kilometer range if you have enough pulse energy from the beginning. So for example, if you use some typical tight sapphire amplifiers operating in kilohertz millijoule level, I heard Edison bought this kind of laser recently. then you can generate this kind of some tens of centimeter filamentation in the air. So this is one of the example of the nonlinear, extreme nonlinear optics. Then more extreme case is the high harmonic generation. So when you reach up to more than 10 to 13 watts per square centimeter, then this can be well described in terms of the three-step model provided by Professor Corcoran. So what happens is that, so due to the high intensity of the laser field, when you focus the laser into the gas, and then your ponderomotive potential, which is basically the kinetic energy the electron can gain from one cycle of electric field, is higher than the ionization potential. And then the gamma, which is called Keldysh parameter, becomes very small, close to zero. And then what happens is that you distort your atomic field like in this way. This is the atomic potential, and then you have the electric field which is very strong. And then you start distorting the atomic potential and directly ionize the electron into this direction to the free space, which is called tunnel ionization or optical field ionization. And then the electron gains the kinetic energy from the external field, and then in the next half cycle or quarter cycle, you have a different electric field direction, and then the electron will combine with the parent atom or ion, then it emits some light, which has the photon energy of corresponding to the ionization potential plus the kinetic energy, which is the electron gained from the external field, which is this photon energy usually comes to the EUV of soft X-ray in terms of the photon energy, which is about 100 eV to all the way up to keV range. In terms of the wavelength, it is about 50 nanometer or down to 2 nanometer or even 1 nanometer. It's extremely short wavelength radiation. Also, this happens every half cycle of the driving laser pulse, which means you can generate some coherent emission because of the regular oscillation. And then the half cycle means in the optical domain is about 1 to 2 femtosecond range in the near IR range. So that means that this emission happens within sub-femtosecond range. So which is so-called attosecond science can start from this emission. Attosecond is 10 to minus 18 watt 10 to minus 18 seconds. So the basic structure, maybe you may already know about this kind of stuff from maybe Edison's research, previous research. The typical structure is that you generate a very long plateau. This is the frequency, the shorter wavelength in this direction, and then sharp cutoff. This is the typical structure of high harmonic spectrum. So, because this is not perturbative nonlinear optics, there is no frequency, order dependence of the efficiencies. There is nothing like this. You have long plateau. And then one important parameter is the cutoff photon energy, which is proportional to the ionization potential plus about 3 times ponderomotive potential. The ponderomotive potential is proportional to the intensity here and the wavelength square of the driving lasers wavelength. But in case you increase the intensity too much and then you generate too much plasma, the phase matching between the driving IR pulse and generated soft X-ray or UV pulse becomes very difficult. So another straightforward way of increasing the cutoff is using the longer wavelength driver. For example, if you use twice longer wavelength driver, then you can, in terms of the wavelength, you can extend the cutoff by 4 times. That's the main idea. So in this case, you don't need to increase the intensity too much.
As you increase the photon energy, so to say, the emission peak
This one, yeah.
Yes, so this gives us an impression that we have a kind of continuous spectrum increasing as the photon energy increases. I think it's an effect of the fact that the emissions, that everything is getting a little bit broader in each step forward in energy. Why is it so?
Not always. This is one of the typical spectra. So depending on the driving condition, it can be true, or sometimes it doesn't happen in that way. But it is also, it can be, for example, there are many electron trajectories in this process. In the plateau region, there are many interference. And then cutoff region, the number of trajectories, electron trajectories that contribute to this emission is lower. So you have a little bit cleaner spectrum. So in that case, you have less well-defined harmonic structure. So you can see some broadening like this. But this is not always the same. So maybe I can show you more data, but this is one of the spectrum obtained using a tight sapphire amplifier, driven by 800 nanometer. So the main focus in this talk is using the mid-IR driver instead of the 800 nanometer tight sapphire laser here. Actually, this is the data from Edison's paper here. And so when we start developing this laser source, we studied some wavelength scaling of the high harmonic generation efficiency and the cutoff. And also, the main takeaway is that if you want to scale the photon energy of the high harmonics to more than 500 eV, and then you have to use maybe 1.5 micron or longer wavelength driver. That's the main message of this study. So that's why if you stick with 800 nanometer tight sapphire lasers, and then you can go up to typically 100 eV to 150 eV in this range with some phase matching. This does not consider the phase matching very well, but so one of our goals when we started our project was to reach the water window source X-ray, so-called, which is defined by the carbon edge and oxygen edge here. So in this region, we can have some good contrast in the X-ray imaging for biological, so-called, basically living cell imaging. So, for example, this has been done already in the synchrotron facilities, which is kind of billion-dollar machines. So we can get this kind of good contrast, phase contrast image from soft X-ray microscopy. But one of our main goals was to realize a tabletop high harmonic generation source for this kind of biological imaging. So we need, for example, 10 to 10 photons per second over this kind of small bandwidth and spot size. We cannot get this kind of high photon numbers, but I'll show you that we can reach up to 10 to 8 or 9 photons per second, which can be used for some biological imaging application. And then I'll move up onto the next generation strong field laser technology. So I'll briefly review the high power tight sapphire femtosecond laser technology based on the Chopper pulse amplification, which is invented by my postdoc supervisor Gerard Moore. And basically, when you amplify the ultra short laser pulses, the peak power is already very high, so you may get the damage in the material during the amplification. So you have to stretch the pulse, and then you decrease the peak intensity here, the amplifier again. Then without the medium, you compress the pulse back to the original pulse duration. This is called Chopper pulse amplification. This has been really well established, and tight sapphire lasers are not now commercially really available and highly stable, because this work has been done over the last 20 years or more. And if you want to generate sub 10 femtosecond pulses, for example, you need some external pulse compression technique based on N2 value, actually, Chi3. So you broaden the spectrum and compress the pulse back, and then you can get even shorter pulse duration than your input pulses. This is a well-known hollow core fiber compression technique. This is a conventional fused cycle high power laser technology used for attosecond science and many other applications. And then I want to ask whether tight sapphire laser technology good enough. Maybe, yeah, partially yes, because still extremely useful for many applications. So you can buy this kind of laser for many. Still, there are a lot of things to do. But in terms of the laser source development, I'm kind of a laser developing person. So in that point of view, this technology has been already saturated. So no major improvement is feasible. The main reason is that the limiting factors with performance scaling using the tight sapphire laser is that CPA is already the laser amplifier, so there's some gain narrowing. So the wavelength is fixed at 800 nanometer. So most of all, the average power is not so scalable, actually. So more than 300 watt is not easy to obtain from the tight sapphire amplifiers. So basically, non-diode pumped solid-state laser. So external compression technique, I mentioned before, based on the hollow core fiber is not energy scalable. So if you want to, for example, use 10 millijoule pulse, it's very challenging. And then I want to say that over the last 5 to 7 years, we have been developing new technology based on the optical chop pulse amplification, which we call as a next generation ultra-fast laser high power technology. The idea was already suggested almost 15 years ago, but the actual research has been performed over the last 10 years. So seed is the same, and then you have a different technique of amplification, so-called optical parametric amplification, but you have the same strategy of stretching the pulse and then compress the pulse, like CPA. So this is why called OP-CPA, combination between OPA and CPA. The main advantage compared to the tight sapphire laser technology is that we can choose the various wavelengths from UV to mid-IR using this kind of technique, and the gain narrowing is quite minor, so we can directly amplify the fused cycle pulses up to terawatt level. So the carrier envelope phase, which is the phase between the carrier and the laser envelope, so which is important for the attosecond science, can be well maintained because of the low thermal load. Also, if you have a good pump laser for the OPA, energy and power are scalable. So that's why we came up with the picosecond ytterbium dot pump laser technology, which is energy and power scalable compared to the tight sapphire lasers. So another important feature of this kind of technology is the pulse synthesis. For example, if you have different colors of input, and if you have a different channels of amplification, and then if they are all coherent, and we can combine all together at the end after the amplification, and then we can scale the energy while we can reach the single cycle or even below single cycle pulses, because they are all different colors. If you mix them together coherently, you can shorten the pulse duration below single cycle. So we demonstrated this technique a while ago, and then we also published a review paper about that. So from MPQ in Max Planck Institute in Germany, they also are pursuing the similar technology, and they call this kind of technology as third generation femtosecond technology in this paper. So ytterbium doped amplifier is very important in this technology. So because they provide relatively broad emission bandwidth, like 20 nanometer, from which you can get 100 femtosecond, or at least sub-femtosecond, you can sub-picosecond pulse duration is obtainable after the amplification. And then there are many choices of gain medium based on ytterbium doped crystals. So in our research, we used ytterbium YAG crystal and ytterbium KYW crystals. They all support broad bandwidth and diode pumped. So this technology is also compatible with ytterbium doped fiber amplifiers, which is excellent for high average power and high rep rate. So this is really promising for the future technology. So this is the latest version of our pump laser, picosecond pump laser for the OPSPA technique. So for example, I'll just briefly go through. So we use the ultra broadband octave spanning tight sapphire oscillator, which covers 0.6 micron to all the way up to 1.2 micron. This is why this is called octave spanning, because this is 2 omega in between two. So if you pick up some light from at 1 micron region, 1030 nanometer actually, and we have only picojoule energy here, so we pre-amplify the pulses using 5 amplifiers here. Then we chop the pulse using so-called chop volume break grading, and then up to some almost 1 nanosecond duration, and then we amplify the pulses up to 70 millijoule using 3 amplifiers. First amplifier is ytterbium KYW regenerative amplifier, and we use 2 multipass amplifiers based on cryogenically cooled ytterbium YAG crystals. This is a pulse compressor using 2 gradings, but because the stretching ratio is quite high, so we need some beam path, long beam path here. And then we obtained up to 70 millijoule, which is still one of the strongest, one of the most powerful picosecond laser operating at kilohertz repetition rate. So that means the average power is quite high. It's already 70 watt. So we compress the pulse down to 6 picosecond. So this is the spectrum to this KYW regen amplifier. Because of the broadband emission bandwidth, this is the input spectrum and output spectrum. So we need only 1.5 nanometer bandwidth for the ytterbium YAG, cryo-cooled ytterbium YAG amplifier. So we need just 1.5 nanometer bandwidth, but there is no gain narrowing between input and output. So KYW amplifier is a good choice for providing some millijoule level output for the next amplifiers here. So we, out of the final amplifier based on the cryo-cooled ytterbium YAG crystal, we obtained up to 70 millijoule with the energy stability, shot-to-shot stability of 1.2% here. And also, this is the long-term stability data. So this is this was measured over 8 hours, and there's some energy drift like 3%, but which is also okay. The long-term stability is important for the attosecond science application. In the time resolved measurement of the attosecond pulses, we need this kind of stability, long-term stability. But also, pointing stability was pretty good, almost just below 10 microradian. We use the active pinpointing stabilizer here. This is actual amplifier chain. This is the KYW regen amplifier, and then we have 2 multipass amplifiers. The crystals are cooled down to 77K using liquid nitrogen here. We have a auto-refilling system down here. They are in the vacuum, actually. So we developed this entire system for last 3 years. And then, so there are also some other similar technologies are available based on thin disk ytterbium YAG amplifiers from, for example, TRUMPF laser. So another cryo-cooled thin disk laser amplifiers are also developed in CFEL Hamburg from our within our group. Also, fiber laser technology is also quite useful, and also well pursued by Jena in Germany. So here we are talking about some repetition rate more higher than 100 hertz or even kilohertz or 100 kilohertz. So this cannot be obtained using the typical tight sapphire amplifiers. And then I'll move on to the actual optical OPSPA system, which is generating multi-dial pulses. So yeah, system is quite complicated, but yeah, we made it over last 5 years. So we still use the same Ti-SAPHIRE oscillator. We mix the pulse at 650 and 950 nanometer using a PPLN crystal, so which is called intrapulse difference frequency generation. If you mix them together, we can generate ultra broadband 2 micron pulse seed here, which is going to 3 amplifiers based on the OPA. So first 2 amplifiers are pumped by some millijoule level neodymium UP amplifier. Actually, we had this amplifier when actually Edison was in our group, and after that we added this newly developed cryo-cooled lithium pulse amplifier, which I presented just in the previous slide. And then the final, we have only 25 microjoule here up to this point, and then in the last amplifier we were able to get up to more than 3 millijoule energy, which is sounds still low, but at the mid-IR range, at the kilohertz repetition rate, this is the highest energy in the femtosecond duration ever generated. So this is very useful for nonlinear optics and strong field laser applications. So so we optimize the seed and pump sizes at this point, and then we have this kind of ultra broadband spectrum with a bandwidth of 400 nanometer at 2.1 micron, with the phase matching in this region in this OPA here. And then the pulse duration is between 35 to 40 femtosecond, and good beam profile of the 2 micron here. Now we have a better beam profile, but I didn't bring it here. So this is the highest mid-IR energy at kilohertz repetition rate, and as I mentioned, this is a good platform for next generation strong field laser source, because we can also switch the wavelength to another wavelength using different OPA materials. And then I'll just briefly show our demonstration about the pulse synthesis. We demonstrated about 5 years ago. In this case, we didn't use the cryo-cooled lithium amplifier, but at the low energy level, like 25 microjoule here. So we use the same 2 micron OPSPA system here. And then we added another channel at 800 nanometer. And then we amplified them together at the same time. They are from the same oscillator, so they are coherent to each other. And then if we, unfortunately, this pulse has the automatic phase stabilization mechanism because of the intrapulse DFG process. So we don't need to lock the phase between this envelope and phase, but this requires some active CP stabilization here. And then we lock 2 pulses. 2 pulses have 3 cycle duration per each. And then we lock the timing very tightly within 200 attosecond 0 using a balanced cross correlation technique. And then at the end, we were able to synthesize this kind of pulse in the optical domain. This kind of pulse can be generated well in the RF domain, but which is not easy in the optical domain because the oscillation is so fast. So for example, if you look at the intensity here, the fluid at half max of the central lobe is about 0.7 cycle, which is sub-cycle pulse duration. For example, if you drive the high harmonic generation using this kind of pulse, you can isolate the emission on this part only. You can have all the emission generated from here. That means you are generating just single isolated attosecond pulse. That's why we are trying to generate this kind of pulse at that time. And this is a later version. If we have this kind of higher power energy pump laser, we can amplify the synthesized pulse even up to millijoule level, and then we can drive the strong field experiment. But we didn't pursue this one recently because of other project. Okay, so I went through the laser technology, which is not available commercially so far. And I move on to the extreme non-linear optics and the mid-IR filamentation. So one of the easiest application is the supercontinuum generation in the solid and air or gas. For the solid, we don't need higher energy because the ionization threshold is much low in the solid materials. So we used about 10 microjoule 2 micron pulse from the second stage of our 2 micron system. And then we chose different materials depending on the dispersion characteristics. Our 2 micron pulse is here. And then, for example, for calcium fluoride here in this curve, this dispersion curve. So at 2 micron, this is at anomalous dispersion or negative dispersion. For barium fluoride, this is almost zero dispersion here. For the zinc sulfide, we have positive dispersion or normal dispersion here. So that's why we chose different materials depending on the dispersion characteristics. So we try to generate some supercontinuum and filamentation inside the crystal, inside the glass. Here and then, as you see, already you are generating visible light from all the way from 2 micron to visible light, but they have different colors depending on the material. So actually, the measured spectra are here. For example, for the calcium fluoride, we were able to reach up to 3.3 micron. For barium fluoride, up to 4 micron. For zinc sulfide, even more, 4.5 micron. In this case, we also measure the spectrum in the visible range. We are able to observe the spectrum all the way down to 500 nanometer. We still have more, but we didn't measure. This means if you consider this ultra broadband spectrum, which is corresponding to more than 3 octave spanning. So this is quite interesting. So in the next 6 months, we are trying to amplify this part further to extend the wavelength range to the further mid-IR. And also, interestingly, in this case, in the calcium fluoride case, we have a negative dispersion, but this continuum generation process is usually triggered by the self-edge modulation, which is very similar to the positive chirp pulse, which can be compensated by the negative dispersion, which is basically the soliton effect. So you can see the self-compression inside the filament automatically. So, for example, if you use a calcium fluoride and a 6 millimeter long propagation, we are able to measure 1.8 cycle pulse, starting from 4 cycle pulse. So we have about 2.5, factor of 2.5 of self-compression. So measured using the frog technique. So which is very consistent to the simulation done by Bong-gu Shim in Binghamton University. They use they solve the nonlinear Schrödinger equation in the medium, considering the collision or some plasma effect and everything. So they show the self-compressed pulse here and some pedestal in the front, which is very consistent to our measurement. And then a more interesting application using the mid-IR filamentation is in the air, because if you can generate some ultra broadband mid-IR in the air, you can, for example, measure some chemical species in the air, so which is give us a lot of interesting applications like LiDAR or standoff detection. Recently in this paper, Baltuska's group in where is it? Vienna University in Austria, they showed this kind of a graph. Basically, interestingly, the critical power for the self-guided filamentation is also proportional to lambda square, the same as the high harmonic generation cutoff. So, which is shown in the black area here. If you have a longer wavelength, you need more peak power. That's a little bit bad for the actual filamentation experiment. If you look up here, for the tight sapphire laser, yeah, you can reach up to petawatt laser peak power, so there's no problem in this range. But if you look up the other wavelengths, for example, if you look at the 2 micron part, people have never reached this region yet, so people were not able to get some self-guided filamentation in the air, in the atmospheric air, I mean the 1 ATM. So in this work, they showed the filamentation at 4 micron because they developed a little bit different, but based on the OPCPA technique, they also developed 4 micron, about 20 millijoule laser operating at 20 hertz, which at low rep rate. So I want to say that in our work, because we have about more than 2 millijoule output and 35 femtosecond pulse duration, we already have more than 50 gigawatt in the peak power. So that means at 2 micron region, we can reach the self-guided regime in the air. So that's why we tried this experiment. Actually, this is the filamentation in the air generated using our 2 micron laser pulses. When you use 75 centimeter focal length lens, we were able to get about 8 centimeter filamentation, which is much longer than the Rayleigh range defined by the diffraction of the laser itself. So when we use the longer focal length, we were able to get even longer filamentation. So also we observed very interesting high order, not extremely high, but some high order harmonics up to 9th harmonic. For example, if you start with 800 nanometer, when you go up to 3rd harmonic, it's already almost in the UV. So it's hard to observe any 5th harmonic or 9th harmonic in the UV because the dispersion is quite different. The phase matching is almost impossible. But if you start at 2 micron, 9th harmonic is now at UV, so you can still see some harmonics here. This is the beam profile after 1 grading, and you can see very beautiful colors. So this is the 3rd harmonic and some supercontinuum here, and then 5th and 7th and 9th harmonic. This is the actual whole beam profile. So you can see also some conical emission here, which is also was reported by our other groups too. This is very interesting. So we also measure the actual spectrum. So you can confirm that we generated up to 9th harmonics from the air directly. We also measure the efficiency, which is about 10 to minus 2 here, 10 to minus 4 here, which is also one of the highest efficiency measured from this kind of process. So we are excited about this result. And also we look at the mid-IR extension too. So depending on the focal length or numerical aperture, we were able to reach up to 3.5 micron wavelength, starting from 2.1 micron here. So which can be used for some chemical detection. So that we simply tried with CO2. So when you, with this spectrum, when you go through the CO2 cell, you can see this kind of absorption spectrum at around 2.7 micron. We had 2 absorption spectrum. So when you turn off the CO2, there's no absorption here. So this can be used for the absorption spectroscopy in the air. So we just simply propagate the filament up to several, about 1.4 meters. And then you can see this kind of absorption already. That means that in the air, a typical concentration of CO2 is only 0.4%, but we can already see this kind of low concentration in the air, which is very sensitive technique for measuring this kind of chemicals. So we want to, for example, set up this kind of prototype remote sensing system for chemicals. So after the air filamentation, we can put in.
What is the advantage to use this laser system instead of some other coherent light source from the mid-IR?
First one is we can generate ultra broadband at the same time. In principle, we can do the single shot measurement, right? So you can measure, if this is strong enough, you can have single shot measurement here. That's one advantage. So many people have some LiDAR and monochromatic LiDAR, which is scanning type. So people, for example, in NIST in US, they are working very hard to have mid-IR LiDAR based on OPO system. But single frequency, it is a scanning type.
Just one shot you can cover the
In principle, yeah. But in this measurement, our detector is based on the thermal detector, so it's hard, it was not possible to measure in single shot the entire spectrum. Okay, maybe because the time is running out, so I'm going to the last part of my talk. So basically, more extreme case of nonlinear optics is a harmonic generation. So we bring the multi-millijoule pulse into the vacuum, and then we focus the light into the gas, and then we block the IR and generate some EUV and soft X-ray, and we measure the spectrum. So this is the harmonic generation has the phase matching to the same direction always. So you can simply block the IR, and then you can see the harmonics. So this is actually what Edison made in our lab. And this is a high harmonic chamber. The first experiment, actually, this happened, unfortunately, after Edison left. So he didn't have this spectrum at the time. So we tried, at the time, in 2011, we had about 500 microjoule to 800 microjoule, 2 micron pulses available. So we started with xenon, which has the lowest ionization potential. So for example, if we use tight sapphire laser at 800 nanometer, you can reach the cutoff at here, just here, below even 30 eV. But when you use the 2 micron, you can see the extension of the cutoff all the way up to 85 eV. And then when you use the krypton, for example, the ionization potential is a little bit higher than xenon, so you can use a little bit higher intensity. So you can also get higher cutoff, like 120 eV. So from argon, we were able to get up to 160 eV at the time. So in argon, the so-called there is a what is I just forgot what it is. Yeah, there is a dip in the 53 eV, which can be reached by the tight sapphire laser barely. But if you see this one, you can easily see this kind of dip here. So this is why the longer wavelength driver at mid-IR is important in this research. And then more recently, we use a gas cell, because in this case, we use a gas puff, and it turned out that the actual pressure at the interaction region of gas puff is not so high. So we can go up to only 100 millibars or 200 millibars with a backing pressure of several bar. So we switched to a gas cell to increase the pressure in the interaction region. For example, after then, we obtained a little bit higher photon energy up to 180 eV from argon, and also we had a similar spectrum from nitrogen. The photon flux at 160 eV was about more than 10 to 8 photons per second, over 1% bandwidth here. But I just want to note that here we can see the harmonics, but for the other cases, we couldn't see the harmonics because of the resolution issue in our spectrometer, in our measurement system. So for the water window soft X-rays, which is up to more than 300 eV, so we need to use neon and helium, which has higher ionization potential. And then we tried with gas-filled hollow core fiber as well, which was implemented by actually Jonathan Square now in USP. And then finally, actually we did this experiment almost 1 year ago, and then we got very strong water window signal. But our spectrometer has been contaminated for some other experiments, so we had to fix it. So finally, just 2 months ago, we measured this high harmonic spectrum, which goes up to 450 eV, actually. The water window range is the carbon edge here, 280 eV to 540 eV. So this shows that we covered almost the entire water window surface X-ray vision, so which can be used for real, some biological imaging applications. So for, the photon flux was not so high, so we have to further optimize the system to get up to 10 to 8 to 10 to 9 photons per second, but which looks a little bit challenging, but maybe doable. So this is everything I have. So this is a summary of my talk. So I just want to mention that we demonstrated the platform of the next generation strong field laser technology based on the OPSPA technique and iterative doped amplifiers and pulse synthesis technique. So I showed two examples of the extreme nonlinear optics using this kind of source. Thank you for your attention.